today's webinar, the Roadmap and Strategy Update for SDL Translation Management. My name is Kate Bradshaw and I will be your host. With the upcoming releases of SDL TMS and SDL Managed Translation, we're hosting this webinar to introduce the new capabilities, features and improvements in these translation management products. We'll also outline the plans for upcoming releases of these products in 2018. Your SDL speakers today are David Pooley, Senior Product Manager for SDL TMS, and Ian Parnell, Product Manager for SDL Managed Translation. We expect today's webinar will last about 45 minutes, followed by a Q&A session. I'll now pass you over to David to begin the presentation.
Thanks, Kate. Okay, so what we're going to cover today, we're going to cover just briefly what our focus areas are for translation management. We'll have a look over the last 12 months of releases for the products that we're talking about today. We'll have a little overview of the new features that have been released or are about to be released in those products, and we'll try and make some time for a demonstration of those features as well to make that a bit more tangible. And then we'll look at our roadmap plans for the rest of 2018. And once we've done all that, then we'll go to Q&A. So, having said that, let's get started. So these are our focus areas for translation management. Anyone who's attended the last webinar that we did at the end of last year will recognize most of these and realize that we've added an extra one on there. So the user experience is very important to us. We continually strive to improve the user experience for our products, have a look at any pain points that users have and try and improve on those. It's important to us that our products also provide rich APIs so that we can support integrations so that both TMS and Managed Translation can form part of an enterprise infrastructure. The convergence strategy that we covered last time, and there's another little slide on this after this slide, so I'll come and talk about that in more detail in a couple of minutes. Security and GDPR, obviously very important. GDPR is a very hot topic now, and we want to make sure that our products enable the customers who use them to be GDPR compliant, and in addition, of course, we also need to make sure that our products allow you to protect the rights of those individuals. And then customer satisfaction, again, always a strong focus area for us, making sure that we continually improve our products, that we fix any issues that are found, and that we implement ideas and functionality that we get as feedback from the stakeholders and customers in the products. So, talking about convergence, again, this is a slide that you probably may have seen last time, but we will continue throughout 2018 to standardize on a core technology platform. So as SDL, we have a number of language technologies available to us around translation memory terminology, online editors, our file filters, the way that we store projects. We have machine translation capabilities in there. And the goal of convergence is to share the same technologies, the same language technologies across all the products that we create. And so obviously this includes SDL TMS, Managed Translation, but this also stretches out to some of our other products that we aren't talking about today, such as World Server, Studio, and Group Share. And if we're talking about, say, translation memory, that's an area where we're innovating in translation memory, but only in the new single cloud-based platform, so that things like fuzzy match repair and in-context matches and any other new innovations that we provide, that's where they will be developed. So if we just have a quick look at the last 12 months in terms of releases, you can see this is for SDL TMS. You can see in the last year we've had 4 releases, 2-point releases on the 11 branch, and then just recently, not quite, maybe that arrow should just be just a touch beyond March. It was just at the beginning of April we released SDL TMS 12.0, and with that we provided now the implementation of the online editor for TMS. We have single sign-on support. We've done some UX improvements around the inboxes, and we've also obviously continued to strive customer satisfaction on those by addressing some of the defects that have been found in previous releases, and also implementing feedback that we've received either through support or through the community site or through the ideas site that we have. I'll let Ian talk about the SDL Managed Translation.
Thanks, David. So yes, just a couple of points that I'd like to kind of make in terms of the releases that we've had on Managed Translation over the last 12 months. Although we've classified these into 5 high-level releases, in reality with Managed Translation we try and release much more frequently. So we keep our releases relatively small in size, but we do them more often. So we typically do a new Managed Translation release every 2 to 4 weeks, but for the purposes of this slide it just helps to try and kind of group those into specific categories. Almost all of the features that we've delivered over the last 12 months have in some way originated from our customers, so either via the ideas site on the SDL community or in the conversations that I've had directly with our customers. In some way customers have shaped the roadmap and the features that we've delivered over the previous 12 months. I'm going to talk in a little bit more detail on a couple of these features later on in the slide deck, so the project templates that we shipped at the end of last year, and also the translation memory search which we've shipped more recently in February this year.
Okay, so if we're going to move on now to look at some of the recent highlights for TMS and for Managed Translation. And as Ian said, some of the items there for Managed Translation will be covered in this section. As I previously mentioned, we've just delivered the first implementation of the SDL Online Editor in SDL TMS, and as of very soon this week we'll also be releasing that for SDL Managed Translation as well. So what this means is that we are replacing the online editing environments of those products with the more modern, feature-rich, browser-based editor. It's inspired by our SDL Trotter Studio product, but obviously in areas we've had to adapt that in order to cater for the fact that you're working in a browser, but it does have full support for tagging, translation memory, lookups, terminology, and all those core features that you would expect of a translation editor. And the advantage to us, again, it's a part of this convergence strategy, is that if we can settle on a core language technology platform and we have that shared across all the products, then it allows us to streamline our development efforts, and it allows us to innovate much faster and much more efficiently on that language platform, because we don't have to continue to maintain all the other legacy solutions that we've had previously in TMS, in Managed Translation, and then also, looking further afield to World Server, Group Share, Studio, etc. So just a quick screenshot, but we hopefully will be having a look at a demo of the online editor. So this is what you can see, and anyone who's familiar with Studio will immediately see where that inspiration is coming from. But as I said, we are sensitive to the fact that you're working in a browser, so it's a bit more about having that environment and about that interaction, and some of the things that you can't, that you rely on in Studio because you're on a Windows platform. We've had to adapt those and work on the fact that you're actually in a browser. One thing to note about this is the cross-browser support. So obviously we've got Chrome, Edge, Safari, Firefox, and we have that support for the browser-based editor there. In addition, and as a sort of design criteria for the online editor from the ground up, was that we wanted to make this enable it to work for mobile. So this also will work on tablets, and it allows you to be doing translation on the go, if you like. So you can be on a train or at your desk in a browser, or I think it will work on a mobile phone, but obviously not the most ideal environment for doing translation. But at a pinch, yes, you could have it work there as well. So you can see on that screenshot, for example, you've got some tags in there. You've got a WYSIWYG formatting. You can see bold and italic, and on the right-hand side, you can see that we can do filtering. There's TM lookups in there. There's a commenting pane that you can bring up, and all of those are fully supported. There's also the capability in the editor. If you're doing a review, you have the option to track any changes that you make. So if the file has come from translation and you're doing the review and you want to make some changes, you can track those changes. You can maybe send them back to the translator, or you can have someone else come and have a look at that review and see what changes have been made. So that's something that wasn't previously possible in the editors for TMS and Managed Translation. Excuse me. The next thing that we've shipped with the current version of TMS, and as I say, the version of Managed Translation that's coming this week, is the capability to sign in using your SDL ID into TMS, into, as I say, Managed Translation, and some people may already have experienced this with the community site or SDL.com or our SDL support site. These are all now supporting the single sign-on methodology using SDL ID. So what that means is that you only have one identity when you want to use SDL's products and services. You only have one identity to maintain. You only have one identity to remember the password, and not different passwords for all of those different products and services. What it also means is that for enterprise accounts, that we can federate with your existing Active Directory service, so that, for example, we've done it ourselves with SDL.com. When any of us SDL people go and sign into the community, or want to sign into a TMS with this enabled, or sign into the support site, as soon as we go to sign in there, it recognizes that we're on the SDL domain, and we are offered the capability to sign in using our existing login. Other users, you would just be simply entering the email address. It would detect that you are federated using your domain, and you will be just prompted to log in with your normal credentials. There's a quick screenshot. So you can see on the right hand side, for example, in TMS, it's possible to now add new users as SDL ID users. If you do this, then it's very simple. You only need to provide one piece of information, and that's the username. And in this case, the username is then the email address for those users. When you come to log into TMS, you'll see on the left-hand side, if you enter the email address of an SDL ID user, it will automatically recognize that, and you'll be taken to this new login screen where, as I say, this was taken a screenshot of my own PC, so I had the capability to do Windows authentication, and I could log in directly that way. Last year we did a release of TMS where we did new inboxes. So we had a new inbox in the browser, and TMS 12 actually has some enhancements to that browser-based inbox around grouping and filtering. In Studio, we also had an SDL TMS inbox. This has now been rebranded as SDL TMS Commute, and you can see, download and install SDL TMS Commute from the SDL App Store, and that offers capabilities such as grouping, filtering, sorting on all the different columns. Makes it much quicker to find files. You can have some settings in there so that you can choose where to download files as you go. And there's just a quick screenshot there to show that that available in Studio, and in this case I've grouped my inbox by organisation and workflow step and language pair, so I can quickly drill down to the English to German tasks at translation within my own particular organisation. And you can see on there the capabilities to do the filtering, hopefully, although it may be a bit small. So handing over to Ian now to talk about project templates in Managed Translation.
Yes, project templates. In the 3 or so years that we've been developing Managed Translation now, I think that the project templates feature is probably the one that I've taken the most satisfaction from a UI perspective, and this is something that we will take a look at in the product itself a little bit later on in the webinar. The impact is minimal. We're essentially talking about 2 additional fields when for users that are creating projects. But the impact that this has for the people who are actually responsible for creating projects is significant. We've had really good feedback from our user base on how this is making the process of creating projects much more simple, quick, and reducing the risk of errors. Essentially, what we're doing with project templates is we're allowing users to store all of the settings that are common to the types of projects that they would have to create. So rather than have to create a project from scratch every time, they can select from a previously created template and auto-populate all of the settings that are contained within that template. We know that the type of person who typically has the responsibility of creating projects, it's normally a content owner of some description, or a departmental manager, or a localization manager. The task of actually creating a project, it's not their main day-to-day job, it's not their main focus. I myself, as a user of Managed Translation to translate our UI strings and our documentation, and I should probably not say this too loudly, but localization is one of the last things on my checklist when we come to do a release. So being able to create my projects with the minimum of fuss, making sure that the chance of me making an error during the project creation process is very important to me. So, as I mentioned, something I'm very happy with. We've been getting some very positive feedback on since we put this into production at the end of last year, and I will be able to show you this directly in the product a little bit later on in the webinar. So with that in mind, I won't dwell too much on the screenshot that we have within the deck. The other feature I just wanted to focus on for a moment or two is the TM search, the translation memory search feature that we released in February this year. So this allows users or provides users with the ability to perform a quick search within one or more of their translation memories that are configured within their environment. I think prior to the release of this feature, I think there was a feeling amongst our user base that perhaps although they were getting the benefit of their translation memories, they weren't able to directly see the contents of their translation memories themselves. So providing this functionality within the application, even if it's not something that a user would work with on a day-to-day basis, but the ability, the insight and ability to go in and perform a search for a particular string or a word within a string and see the results from their translation memory has proved to be very useful. So where a localization manager or a departmental manager, where they're receiving queries perhaps from their in-country resources about previously translated content, then instead of having to go to their project manager or their language services provider to respond to those queries, they can do that to an extent directly themselves now within the application. So it gives them a little bit more ownership and visibility into their TMs. And again, if we just take a quick look at how that's actually presented within the UI, again, it's in keeping with managed translation as a whole. It's very simple. So to the left of the page, a user is able to clearly enter the string or the word that they want to search for. They can choose from their available project options, which in turn determines which translation memories we're going to perform a search against. They have the option of choosing whether they want to perform a plain TM lookup or a concordant search. They can specify what languages they want to search for, including multiple target languages if they wish to, and specify the minimum match that they're interested in seeing the results for, and how many matches that they would like to be provided with. And then once the users perform that search on the right-hand side of the screen, or in the main body of the screen, we're providing the user with a list of the matches that have been that are a result of the search that they've performed. So they can see the actual source and target string, the name of the TM that match has come from, clearly the match percentage that was calculated, and any penalties that were applied against each match. A user can also expand within any of the search results to get more of the metadata about that particular segment within their TM, so they can see when it was created, how many times that segment has been used for the contents, when it was last modified, and so on. So again, very simple and intuitive for somebody to go in who's not necessarily a heavy linguist necessarily, but someone can go in, they have a query, they need to search for a particular string within their TM, they can go in and do so from within this page.
Okay, I'm going to try and do a demonstration now. What I've actually done with this is to create a video. I thought it would be the easiest way to do that, and what I will do, or I'll ask Kate to do maybe at the end of the presentation or within the coming few days, is to publish this video through YouTube and announce that in the community, so that anyone who hasn't had the opportunity to visit today or wants to see it again, you'll be able to watch that later on. So bear with me, I'm going to go and try and screen share. Okay, so we're starting the presentation with a view of a document that we're going to translate in TMS 12 using the SDL Online Editor, and I'll talk through as it plays, and hopefully it will all work. So this is the Microsoft Word document. It's got some footnotes in there, it's got hyperlinks, it's got colours and various other formatting that you can see. So if we come into TMS now, I'm going to enter my own email address, and you'll see, as I said, we are federated to the SDL Active Directory, so that as soon as I hit Tab, I'm taken through to this SDL ID, and I can just click on the Windows authentication here, and that will take me in to SDL TMS. The way that we enable Online Editor is by configuring the organization. So in the setup, we can see here that we have a Language Cloud Access tab. We can put API keys and tenants. These are taken from your Language Cloud account, and once that's done, then we can create a new translation. So if we go into Projects and create a new job, let's give it a name, TMS 12 information, I think, memory. I've got a configuration called SDL Online Editor, and I'll just drag that Word document in and submit that. So that will create the new job, it will do all the filtering, it will make all the content ready, available in the Online Editor. We're just going to have a look at the details for that job. It's on start, but it shouldn't take long. This workflow is a very simple workflow. There's no authorization or anything, so it just goes straight to translation. So going back to my home page now, and this is as you can see, I've grouped my inbox by organization, so I can quickly find that. My job is at translation. I'll click on that one, and then click on the file name to open that in SDL Online Editor. Now what this will do is it'll throw up a new tab, but it will take me through to SDL Language Cloud. If you're eagle-eyed, you'll see that this is a user acceptance test version of SDL Language Cloud. But here we are in the editor, and this is all the content that has been pulled from the thing. You can see you've got all the colors and the formatting and the tags and everything else in there. I've even got a little walkthrough which helps me from my first time into using the editor. There's little tips about what I should be doing next. So I've decided not to translate that first segment. Let's go confirm that. Let's go down. Let's take the segment 3. Looks a little bit more interesting. There's some more formatting and tags in there. So the first thing I'll do is to remove all the formatting from that segment. I've used the keyboard shortcut, but you can see that there's also the remove formatting or clear formatting on the toolbar there. And it's very simple to put the formatting back in again. So if I'm just going to copy the formatting exactly from the source, so when I hit Control and comma, I get a list of all the formats available in the source, and I can just cycle through those. It highlights where that's been applied in the source, and I can pick the right one. You can also pick that footnote there. Yes, this one needs to be italic, and then we'll just add it back in again on that TMS at the bottom. But obviously I'm not actually doing the translation here, but having done the translation, you can just apply the formatting in the right place. As I said earlier on, we can do filtering. So having confirmed that first segment, for example, I can just go and see all the ones that I've flagged as translated, which is just that first segment. And if I can clear that filter and get all those segments back again, there are TM lookups. So I had a TM result for this segment. Obviously, this is a test environment, so the translation is not great, but you can see there's an 87% match there on that segment. And I've also got this capability to do commenting, as I said before, so I can write a new comment in here. Having done all that formatting, just ask somebody to make sure that it's okay. Apply that to the scope, so I can apply it to the current segment or just to the words. I can set a severity level on that. Having applied that comment, you can now see that it's highlighted in the translation, so I know that there's a comment associated with this text. And as a reviewer, I could come back in and just see what that comment is. Or as the person who created the comment, I can actually delete it, which I'll do now, and that will clear that comment from there. So that's just a quick video of SDL Online Editor in action in SDL TMS 12. I shall now hand over to Ian, who is hopefully going to give us a demo of some of the managed translation features.
Yeah, thanks, David. So as I was talking about earlier, for the project templates feature, I wanted to just show you from the context of the application itself how this works, what the principles of the product is and the feature is. In addition to being the product manager on the managed translation system, I am also a customer of managed translation myself. As I mentioned earlier, all of our software UI strings, all of our documentation is submitted by myself through managed translation. So I get to see firsthand kind of how we're doing from a user experience perspective. So I'm actually logged in here to the production environment that I would use to submit my translation requests. Now, I'm sure most of the people that we have on the call today will be familiar with the project creation form. Prior to project templates, I would have had to go through and provide the details of the project name, any instructions that I wanted to be followed as part of my translation project, and specify the date by which I wanted to have my translations delivered back to me. So these are pretty standard. They would always be required as part of the project creation process. Now previously, what I would have had to do when creating a project is I would have had to specify all of the subsequent fields within the form every time I created a project. So I would have to specify which organisation this was relevant for. I would have to choose between the project options that are available to me, the language, source and target languages that I was interested in, any custom information, any kind of metadata fields that we have configured in your environment, and clearly then I would upload the files that require translation and create my project. But I would essentially have been starting from scratch every time I created a new project. So with project templates, how this has impacted on myself as the submitter or the person responsible for localization or managed translation, what I've done is I've created 3 project templates which map to the 3 types of projects that I would typically create. So for my documentation, I would normally localize the documentation into a subset of the languages. So our UI is supporting more languages than what we do for our documentation. I then have a template for my UI strings, which require human translation. So clearly before we do a production release, we'll make sure that all of our UI strings have been properly translated, and we've had linguistic testing performed with the latest translations. But then I have a third option which allows me to just very quickly request machine translations for all of our latest strings. So during the development process of a new feature, it is interesting and useful just to see how all of our UI strings look in all the localized languages, just to get a feel if we're clearly using too much space for a particular button, for example, or that there's some obvious linguistic issue, then we can go back and review the source text and adapt that according to what can fit within the layout of the page. So these, as I say, the 3 common types of requests that I would normally create. So rather than have to go in and fill in all of the additional fields relevant to these types of projects, what I can do now is simply specify that I want to use a template for my project. You will notice that having selected the template, all of the following fields have now been pre-populated according to the settings that I've defined in my project. So all of the languages that I translate my documentation into are provided, the project option is selected, and so on. So all I'm left to do now is enter the build number, which will always be different for each project. So clearly I don't want to have that contained and stored within the template. I have to enter that manually, and then I would upload the files requiring translation. But from an end-to-end perspective, it's much faster for me to now go in and create my new project. And I mean, just to kind of prove the kind of the process for the other templates that I have stored against my user account, for the UI strings that I want to send for human translation, you'll see that I've selected the correct project option in this context, and the language pairs have been pre-selected according to my requirements. And finally, for the machine translation, all the settings remain the same. I still want to get the machine translation for all of the target languages, but I want to use a different project option. Now, the environment I'm using in here, or the project creation settings that are available for my user account, relatively simple. But if you think about some of the other customers that we have working with managed translation, they may have 30 target languages instead of the 15 or so that I'm translating into. They may have another 10 custom attribute fields in their environment, which are useful or are repeatable between projects, where it's useful to have those values stored within a template. So For a single project, sure, you know, the impact is relatively minimal. The time to create a project has been reduced, not significantly, but it's more about the quality and reducing the risk of making an error during project creation. But the users that are doing this on a day-to-day basis, in some cases we have users that are creating tens of projects a day, all following a common and repeatable pattern. This is clearly having a very significant impact on the amount of time that they're spending in managed translation and how long it's taking them to create their projects. And with that, we'll return back into the presentation. And we're just going to take a look now through the roadmap plans for the remainder of 2018. So starting with TMS, I'll hand back over to David to run through the plans for that product.
Thanks, Ian. So as you can see, we have this split up into the 4 quarters for the year. The Q1 was the TMS 12 that we've just delivered, and the features as described and as already presented were there. So we've just finished planning for our next 3 months of development effort. So the first thing that we want to do is to obviously try and gather some feedback on our implementation of SDL Online Editor, have a look at where we can improve that, what features, functionality might be missing, or what might not be quite in the right place, so maybe we can improve on the UX. We want to extend that editor out to more personas where appropriate, so make sure that we've got translators, reviewers and anyone else in that sort of content lifecycle involved there. We'll then be looking to bring in the new cloud terminology that we've been working on. So this is a rather than continuing to develop on the multi-term platform, we're looking at all the functionality that's available in multi-term and bringing that set of features into a cloud terminology platform, and then we'll be looking to bring that into SDL TMS. GDPR, as I mentioned earlier, very important for SDL TMS and for all SDL products. So we are looking at some initial implementations of how we can make sure that we clean up any sensitive information that we're holding either in the content or about the users of SDL TMS. So we'll be putting some enhancements in there, and again, as always, and you'll see that throughout the year, customer satisfaction, as I've said before, is very important to us. And then as we move on through the 3rd and 4th quarters, and now we're into some more forecast, we'll do more concrete planning for these nearer the time, but our anticipation is that we'll be then looking to iterate on the cloud terminology. We'll be looking to bring in cloud translation memory. We'll continue with GDPR. As we bring in that cloud translation memory, then we will hopefully get this feature called Uplift in there as well, which is all about repairing fuzzy matches. So to enhance, a 75% fuzzy match and make that a little bit better, work out which bits are missing and improve them in that match that we get back from the TM. And then as we go through into Q4, then again, just sort of iterating on the things that we've gone before, having a look at filters, having a look at adaptive MT and where that may fit within the TMS platform. Right now, it's possible that there may be some more innovation coming through in TM. It may be that we get feedback in some of the implementations that we've done in either TMS or other products of the converged platform, and so we may be able to provide some more innovation there and do something that no one else is doing. And again, obviously, customer satisfaction. So that's for TMS. And for managed translation.
Yes, so on the managed translation roadmap for this year, in follow-up to what David was talking through, convergence forms a very big part of that. There's a lot of focus on this. David mentioned we have an upcoming managed translation release late this week. That's actually going to go live tomorrow morning UK time. In that release, we will include support for SDL ID and the SDL Online Editor integration. Now, because these features span a number of different components and products, we won't immediately be enabling SDL ID for all users. That's something that we'll need to coordinate and align TMS upgrade schedule. So for the managed translation users that we have on the call today, don't worry, you won't kind of log in tomorrow and suddenly be confronted with the SDL ID requirements. That's something that we will announce over the coming days and provide more information as to what users are advised to do in registering for an SDL ID and then going ahead and linking their SDL ID with their existing credentials. Further into the rest of this year, again related to convergence, we will be introducing a new cloud terminology platform integrated with managed translation among our other technology products. There is, as always, a very strong shift or focus on innovation and implementing the features that our customers are asking for. So I'm in touch with a lot of customers on a regular basis, either directly or through our community, which is clearly very useful, so I get to hear what customers are asking for in the real world. So we'll be taking that on board in our product roadmap, as always, throughout the rest of this year. And we will also, over the next 2 or 3 months, be rolling out an evolution of the current UI for managed translation. And I say evolution rather than revolution. It's not going to be a complete change to what you're already familiar with. It will just be an incremental improvement over what we have today. Again, this ties back into the convergence story. We want all of our products and user interfaces to look consistent wherever possible. So this will be another step along that road. So if we just kind of talk through a couple of the features coming later this year in a little bit more detail. So I mentioned that the cloud terminology service that we will be releasing and incorporating across our products later on in the year. Again, this ties back in with our convergence objective. We want to have ultimately a single terminology solution that is available across all of our language technology products that cover the full supply chain. So from the point of actually creating a project in managed translation, specifying which term basis, which terminology you want to have applied for that project, then respecting and associating the term basis with the project that gets created in TMS, making the links to that term base available to translators, either working offline in a studio package or working online through the online editor. So making sure that all of the personnel, the resources from a linguistic perspective have access to the right terminology resources, right through to the point of actually managing your terminology. So we want that to be as seamless and integrated and a consistent experience for users as possible. And we're hoping that we should have something, at least a version 1, that we can release before the end of Q2. And just to give you a sneak preview as to how the cloud terminology application will appear, you'll recognize the UI for those of you who are working today in managed translation. So consistent with what we have. So I won't go into too much of the detail in here, but you can know what it is that we're looking to implement around terminology. The cloud translation memory service follows a similar theme. So all of the innovation and the new features that we have been incorporating into our Group Share Studio translation memory format we want to make those available across all of our products, across all of the supply chain. So being able to offer that and integrate that throughout the different products is another strategic objective for SDL and our language technology products. Again, a preview in here. So this screenshot is actually taken from GroupShare, where we already have the Cloud TM format available. The UI will look very similar once we have adopted this across all of our other language technology products. And then the final feature that I just wanted to go through in a little bit more detail is something that we call product broadcasts. So the intention here is to allow us to communicate to our users from within the application itself. So this might be to notify users of product updates, perhaps announce planned downtime that might be coming up in the next week or two, to maybe provide users with more information about new features. So these are the types of messages and announcements that we will be making available through this broadcasting feature within the application. So we want our customers to know as early in the process as possible about all of the innovative features that we are making available through the products. And again, just to give you a visual indication of how this will be implemented, and also I'll mention at this point that the UI evolution that we will be releasing in the coming months, the screenshot you see in here, the mock-up, is also based off of that new UI theme. But within here, you now have a notifications icon from within the main header bar. From here, you will be able to see if you have any new notifications or announcements that have been added since the last time you logged in. You can go in and see any previous announcements that you might want to go back and get more of the information on or refresh your memory about. But it's all handled from a single notifications icon from within the main header.
Yeah, just to reiterate something that we were talking about earlier, all the information about product releases and everything else, and where you can see information about TMS, about managed translation, where you can raise ideas for new features or functionality that you'd like to see in those products, that's all available on our community. If you're not already a member, then just go to community.sdl.com. You can sign in with your SDL ID if you have one. If you don't have one, you can sign up for an SDL ID there. We also have a YouTube channel available there, and as I said earlier, that's where I'll be looking to publish that video that I showed you of SDL TMS 12. So I strongly encourage you to join the community to keep up to date with the latest information about our translation management products.
Okay, thank you very much, David and Ian, for the presentation. We have reached the end of the presentation portion of this webinar, so we're going to go to questions now. So feel free to get those questions coming in. There have already been a couple that have come through, so I will kick off straight away. The first question is, can I use SDL ID with my existing Active Directory?
Yes, as I mentioned earlier on, talking about the SDL ID, that's actually implemented through a capability called Auth0, and Auth0 offers the connection bridges between itself and your own Active Directory or LDAP solution, so that you can log in using your existing credentials and not have to create a new user ID for SDL ID.
Perfect, thanks David. Ian, a question has come in for you. Will the new language cloud terminology be compatible with SDL multi-term, term basis, or will customers have to recreate term bases?
Thanks, Kate. So yes, the first point on that is that the cloud terminology solution is, you should think of it as a different product to multi-term. but we will have a migration path that we can support customers on that are interested in moving towards the new cloud terminology. So within the cloud terminology system, we have the ability to define a schematic, if you like, for our term base, and we can create that schematic so it maps to the current structure of the term basis that you are already working with in multi-term. So, I mean, apologies, I can't see who is raising questions within the application here. So, by all means, if whoever asked the question would like to contact me directly following the webinar, I'm more than happy to kind of give you some more of the details around the cloud terminology solution, give you more information about when we're hoping for that to be available, perhaps looking to migration options for you in moving away from multi-term. I mean, I should just point out, and I should have said this earlier on in the presentation when we were talking about cloud terminology. Clearly, although the cloud terminology solution is something that we have been developing now for a number of years, we don't yet, or we haven't yet reached the point of feature parity with multi-term. But clearly the cloud terminology product is the one that we will be focusing our innovation on as we move towards feature parity and bring in additional products within the software. So as I mentioned, please get in touch with me, and the same applies to anybody else on the call who's interested in getting more information around cloud terminology, and I'll be more than happy to kind of go through more of the details with you. And sorry, just to kind of interrupt Kate, I see Ulrika has asked a question about the multi-term workflow capabilities. We don't currently have support for workflow in cloud terminology, but that is a focus on our roadmap. So it may not work in exactly the same way as you're familiar with in multi-term workflow, but we will be building in that workflow capability within the cloud terminology solution. So again, I would encourage anybody that has kind of questions or would like to get more information on the terminology solution to get in touch with me, and I'm very happy to kind of keep you appraised as we work through the next couple of months and build out the integration from our managed translation and TMS systems. And as always, it's good to kind of get that feedback from the people who will be using the product once we have this released.
Great stuff. Ian, before we go to one of the last questions, the best way to get in touch with you via your email address?
Yeah, you can catch me on my email address, so iparnell@sdl.com. If you are already signed up to the community, you can also send me a message via the community. Yes, however you prefer to get in touch, you can reach me on either of those options.
Okay, fantastic stuff. And then I think the last question we'll go to that's come in: can I switch between SDL Online Editor and SDL TMS Studio?
Good question. Right, as of now, with the version 1 implementation of how we've done SDL Online Editor and SDL TMS, you have to currently pick one or the other. So you either use the Studio offline or you use SDL Online Editor online to do your workflow steps, so to do translation or review. You can switch between the two on two different workflow stages. So you could do your translation in TMS Studio, and then you could do the review in SDL Online Editor. But within one workflow step, you can't. There's no hybrid model at the moment. Having said that, it is something that we've just taken into the plan for the next 3 months. So hopefully that's one of the things that we'll be iterating on in the next version of SDL Online Editor with the next release of TMS.
Great stuff. Thank you, David, and thank you, Ian. I think that's all we've got time for in terms of questions today. So before we close, we just wanted to share the following slide and just outline that, as I'm sure you're all very aware, as with all our product roadmap and strategy sessions, today's presentation is intended to sort of outline our general product direction and is for information purposes only, and it is not a commitment to deliver any features or functionality you've seen today. But other than that, thank you very much for everyone who has attended the webinar today. We hope you found the session useful and informative, and we'll share the recording with you very shortly. And I'd encourage you to get in touch if you do have any questions. So have a great rest of the day, and thank you very much from me.